production will focus on the actress Fay Wray and her role in the Avalon Theater in Easton, Maryland. Fay Wray was a silent film actress who visited St. Michael's and the eastern shore of Maryland for the production of The First Kiss. She was born on a ranch near Cardston, Alberta, to parents who were members of the Mormon Church. She was one of 6 children and had British heritage. Her family moved to the United States a few years after she was born. They moved to Salt Lake City in 1912, Lark, Utah in 1914, and then relocated when Fay was a teenager and she could attend Hollywood High School. In 1923, she appeared in her first film at the age of 16 when she landed a role in a short historical film sponsored by a local newspaper. In the 1920s, she landed another role in the silent film The Coast Patrol in 1925, and she also had uncredited bit parts. In 1926, the Western Association of Motion Picture Advertisers selected Wray as one of the Wampus Baby Stars, a group of women whom they believed to be on the threshold of movie stardom. At the time, she was under contract to Universal Studios. The following year, partly due to the Wampus Baby Stars publicity, she was signed to a contract with Paramount Pictures. Paramount had extensive publicity opportunities for Fay Wray. Here she is modeling with the new New Mexico license plate on behalf of Paramount Pictures. In 1928, Fay was assigned the film The First Kiss, which was directed by Roland Lee and starred Gary Cooper. It was based on the short story Four Brothers by Tristram Tupper, and the film is about a Chesapeake Bay fisherman who turns to pirating in order to be rich enough to marry a society girl played by Fay Wray. The film was produced by Famous Players Lasky and released by Paramount Pictures. A lot of the filming took place on the Chesapeake Bay in St. Michael's, Maryland, as well as the surrounding area. You can see the lush vegetation as well as the docks and harbor scenes in pictures from this film. Unfortunately, the film is considered to be lost today. No copies of it have been found, but I believe most of the filming was done around St. Michael's, Maryland, based on these photos, and Fay Wray and Gary Cooper stayed in St. Michael's and Easton, Maryland, in order to shoot this film. Tristram Tupper, the author of the story the film was based on, was very passionate about Maryland, and he really focused on the economic downturn many towns in the United States suffered when young men were made to fight in World War I. American casualties in World War I, as well as British casualties and just general all European casualties, were very significant. And because young men never returned, towns all across the United States experienced labor shortages and economic downturns, and Tupper was very concerned with this, and these themes come across in his book, The Four Brothers. So I believe Tupper insisted that filming take place along the Chesapeake Bay, and it did. One of Gary Cooper's friends was a screenwriter named John Monk Saunders. Saunders had already written a film for Gary Cooper, The Legion of the Condemned, and he was assigned to Paramount Pictures due to his novel about pilots in World War I, purchased for a then record $39,000 by Paramount Pictures in 1926. Saunders was an incredibly skilled screenwriter. His films won Academy Awards for Best Pictures, but unfortunately he was also a drinker. And so Saunders, I believe, was present in St. Michael's, Maryland during the filming of The First Kiss. He was friends with Gary Cooper. He was fresh off of a divorce in 1927, and I believe he courted Fay Wray during the filming of this movie. John Monk Saunders was born in Hinckley, Minnesota, and he had 5 siblings. He was born in 1897. He was an excellent student and athlete and received his education at University of Washington in Seattle, where he was president of his freshman class and quarterback on the freshman football team. He served in the Air Force during World War I as a flight instructor in Florida, but he was never able to secure a posting to France, which disappointed him for the rest of his life. After the University of Washington education, he was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, entering in the fall of 1919, where he was the first American to attend Magdalen College. He was a member of their championship swimming team and played on the rugby squad. He was supposed to complete his 3-year degree in 3 years, but completed it in just 1.5 years. The British background of Saunders was incredibly important to Fay Wray, who also had British heritage. After the war, he spent time in Paris, then returned to Oxford, completing his master's degree in 1923. He then worked as a journalist in the United States, including work with the LA Times and New York Tribune. He was a skilled storyteller and started selling short stories to magazines such as Cosmopolitan, Liberty, and he became the editor of American Magazine. He realized movie rights were the way to success, and he first sold the movie rights to one of his stories in 1924. And then in 1926, Paramount purchased the rights to his unfinished novel, which I discussed previously. In this way, he was mixing with the Hollywood crowd, and in 1922, he married Avis Hughes, who was the daughter of novelist Rupert Hughes, who was the uncle of Howard Hughes. Avis Hughes would go on to be Avis Hughes McIntyre and inherit almost 5% of the Howard Hughes estate. But by 1927, the two were divorced, and Saunders was courting Fay Wray, marrying her in 1928. Part of the First Kiss's publicity tour in 1928 was showtimes at the Avalon Theater, which was and is a theater in the Eastern Shore and very important to the filming of The First Kiss. Building of the Avalon Theater began in 1921 and finished in 1922 at a cost of $100,000. The Avalon Theater immediately became the showplace of the Eastern Shore. It included leaded glass doors at every theater entrance, an 18-foot dome with 148 lights, a 300-pipe organ, an electric player piano, and a ballroom on the second floor. When the Shine Theater chain purchased the theater in 1934, they completely refitted the building. The ballroom was closed and the theater redesigned with an Art Deco theme that still stands today, and you can see some of these circular Art Deco details in the pictures from The First Kiss, but I'm not sure if filming of The First Kiss occurred in the theater. It's not clear. The reputation as a movie house grew quickly due to the Shine Theater chain's influence. The Shine Theater chain actually collapsed under a Supreme Court case alleging monopoly, that the Shine Theater chain was a monopoly in the United States, and so the Shine Theater chain eventually fell apart. But in the 1930s, it was a very reputable brand of theaters. In 1987, unfortunately, the theater was under strain. It had mildew, cracks in the walls, stained carpeting, and rickety seats. But Easton Mayor George Murphy and a private restaurant group led by Dick Edgar and Will Howard opened the way to renovations to restore the theater building beyond its former glory. These renovations finished in 1918, and the Avalon Theater was restored and upgraded to a performing arts center, retaining its stage, dome ceiling, and incredible acoustics. The restaurant group redeveloped the remainder of the building and added a third floor, incorporating fixtures and finishes reflecting the 1920s highlights of the theater. These renovations cost over $1.3 million, and the theater was sold to the Midshore Center for the Performing Arts, which was unsuccessful in maintaining profitability. In 1992, the theater was purchased by the town of Easton, Maryland, and the theater is now open today under the leadership of the Avalon Foundation, and this is a group that enables historic performances as well as modern performances, and the theater remains a highlight of the Eastern Shore and of the town of Easton. Fay Wray and Gary Cooper were in Easton and at the Avalon Theater for the premiere of The First Kiss in 1928. The Avalon Theater, while I couldn't find any stories related to their visit, supposedly is haunted by a ghost in its elevator. I don't know. I couldn't confirm that, but it is a very interesting building, and I encourage a visit if you're ever in the area. I believe Saunders was inspired by the town of Easton for his later work, The Docks of New York, which was considered a historic film and is actually held by the Library of Congress because of its historic significance. The marriage of Fay Wray and John Monk Saunders continued until 1939. Unfortunately, he was a drinker and a womanizer, and this was very difficult for Fay Wray to handle. Their friend and fellow co-star Gary Cooper was the best man at their wedding, but Saunders suffered from alcoholism throughout his adult life, and in 1934, during their marriage, he was involved in a highly publicized fistfight with actor Herbert Marshall. The fistfight shocked people, and it led to Saunders losing work opportunities and being condemned from the Hollywood social scene. In his life, he required care by a nurse from Johns Hopkins Hospital, but unfortunately, he hanged himself a year after he got divorced from Fay Wray on March 11th, 1940, in a Fort Myers, Florida beach cottage. The marriage was made difficult by Fay Wray being the victim of an extortion plot in July 1928. According to the Los Angeles Examiner, the suspect was captured by Captain of Detectives Edward Slaughter and a squad of officers while in the act of recovering a packet of fake money at the rendezvous of the payoff. He gave his name as Lion Bernard of 521 South Cloverdale Street in Los Angeles and said he was a friend of the Wray family. I'm not sure if he said he was a friend through the family's Mormon connections, but he did say he was a friend. To avoid arrest, he tried to shoot it out with his captors, but was overpowered by the police. This occurred when Fay Wray returned from her honeymoon with John Monk Saunders, and she was residing at 7919 Thelma Avenue. She was handed a message at her home shortly after noon yesterday in July 1928 by a special delivery postal messenger. On the envelope was written, "Quiet is necessary to save dear old mother at once today, Saturday the 14th. Mum." The envelope contained the following grim message, crudely printed in pencil. "Say the life of your mother is in great danger, and only the payment by you of $2,000 will save her life. She is being watched constantly. Don't be foolish or call the police. In fact, don't tell a soul. Follow instructions and she will not be harmed. Get money in assorted currency wrapped in newspaper. Then get in your car and drive to a vacant lot at Sunset and Laurel Avenue. You will notice some tall weeds growing on the west side of Laurel Avenue between the street and the sidewalk. Slow up as you pass these and throw money here. Then drive straight down Laurel to Santa Monica. Drive like hell. As long as nothing happens to us, your mother is safe. Don't even tell your husband. If we are hunted, good. Bye, mother." The letter was unsigned. Miss Wray immediately notified the captain of detectives at Hollywood Station. Time was scarce because there was less than an hour of work before the appointed delivery of the money. With several detectives, Captain Slaughter went to the rendezvous. He stationed a detective in a house across from the vacant lot. Captain Slaughter and Detective Lieutenant Page concealed themselves near the lot on Sunset Boulevard, in the weeds identified by the extortionists. Miss Wray, alone in her car, drove to the appointed spot. I'm not sure if it was her husband who told her to do this, but she did go to the site alone. She drove slowly past the lot and tossed the decoy packet into the weeds and drove rapidly towards Santa Monica Boulevard. The officers waited. Half a block from the vacant lot, they spied a man without a coat nervously sitting in a parked automobile. For almost an hour, the suspect stalled. He stepped from his car, paced slowly back and forth in front of the lot, scanning the weeds. Several times he got back into his car and drove around the block. Finally, he returned to the lot. He advanced into the weeds, picked up the decoy package, and returned to his car. As he was climbing into the car, the detectives rushed him. He drew the pistol, aimed, and it misfired. The gun was knocked from his hand and he was arrested. The extortionist said he was broke. He knew Miss Wray in her school days at Hollywood. I went to school with her brother and sister back in Bingham Canyon, Utah. I knew she deeply loved her mother, Mrs. Vina Wray. I knew Mrs. Wray lived at 1332 Sierra Bonita Avenue. I thought I could get away with it. He said he was married. Miss Wray faced him in the station and asked him why he did it. He broke down and wept. He was charged with suspicion of extortion. So this is an interesting story because it shows the difficulties Fay Wray was dealing with in her personal life the same year as The First Kiss came out, the same year that she was married to her husband, and it shows that she was dedicated to her family who remained in the area. The fact that her mother was in danger was very frightening to her, and then the fact that she stood up against this extortionist in court is also remarkable. Again, the years for America after World War I were incredibly economically difficult. Many men, including this man, Bernard, were suffering from economic downturn, unemployment, just horrible economic situations in the country. So one does wonder what else was going on behind the scenes, but the man, I believe, was jailed, and I don't think Fay Wray encountered any more extortionist attempts for the rest of her life. Fay Wray would go on to appear in many, many movies, including horror movies, and she would remarry to Robert Riskin in 1942, and then to Sanford Rothenberg in 1971. She had 3 children, and her role in King Kong was one of her most well-known. Upon her death, the Empire State Building's lights were actually turned off in homage.